Okay. Yeah, I got you on there too. So yeah, this is what's going on. All right, let's get to the Tao page.
Is live now.
Are we live?
Yes.
All right, we are live. You never know, do you, with technology? Well, welcome back, everyone. You know who I am, Caroline Best of the Tao of Horsemanship, and my lovely co-host, Sabrina Arbogast.
Hey guys.
Welcome back to Everything Horses and More podcast, weekly podcast. We are all about educating, liberating, and inspiring horse owners around the world. Yeehaw, join the revolution. So some of you may already know, yesterday we did our monthly live Q&A webinar on free training, basically all about people would send in questions from all over the world, plus we had people attending who had some awesome questions yesterday. And it's still there. It's on our Tao of Horsemanship Facebook page. So if anyone's interested in listening to me answering for 2.5 hours, talking and answering questions, check it out. And of course, this webinar is to promote the Mastery Membership Riding Foundation program and all that it includes, which is massive, just absolutely massive. And I can't say enough, that this program is my life's purpose, my passion, and it's taken me 10 years to develop it. And we'll still be tweaking it, but the core of it is developed and it's been tested over the years and all that fun stuff. So it is both my apprenticeship program for students that used to want to come and get certified. I no longer certify, not right now, but it is my apprenticeship program. And it is also where I start every horse and restart every horse. So it is just massive. Again, all that it includes. And anyway, so let's move on to today's topic, because that's why we did not have a podcast yesterday. We were doing our typical Tuesday every month webinar. And today we are going to be talking about what's missing in classical training and training in general. And so for those of you that have listened to last month, September's podcast, all about training, I was talking about one of the master trainers, Nuno Oliveira, one of the classical dressage, classical training trainers, instructors, and how much I absolutely adore his work. I've never had the privilege of studying with him personally. He was not around, but when I got back into horses so many years ago, his books were one of the books that I read. And in addition to wanting to be thank you for that, very well-rounded trainer and instructor myself, it was the three top were Nuno, and then it was Tom and Bill Dorrance, and who were no longer available either. And then who is still living in his late 90s, Jack Brainerd. And I actually worked with Jack for about a month, and I attended 4 of his advanced horsemanship clinics where we were developing flying lead changes. And so Jack's just amazing. So Jack is the reining side as well as now Western dressage. And then you have the other side of classical dressage with Nuno. And then somewhere in the middle, you have general horsemanship, which is all about Tom and Bill Dorrance and feeling of the horse and for the horse. And so bringing those 3 up is pretty important, I think, in general. I don't know if in general is the right word, because like I said, coming back to horses, I took my time. I took 2 years to map out what I wanted, who I wanted to study. And then I also took those 2 years to save money so that I could take a sabbatical, so to speak. I could take 2 years off of work. I was working for myself. I had my own business, which I ended up leaving and to start this. And so I planned it. And that's because I wanted to be a trainer. I wanted to be an instructor. I wanted to be a clinician. I wasn't just, I didn't just want to own horses, and I didn't have that kind of money, to just put tens and tens of thousands of dollars into studying other people. I really took it seriously coming back in. Not to mention, in addition to studying with so many different people, studying the three that I just mentioned, I also had my own unique way and approach that I've often talked about. But when that approach was developed, I was a young child, not even teenager. So I didn't even know what I was doing. And that's what makes it difficult. That's why I keep promoting for all of you, whether you just want to develop your horse using my method, or if you want to train your horse and become a trainer, you need to follow a program. You really do. And that's why I did what I did when I got back into horses, because there was no way I could retrace my steps as a 9 and 10-year-old. I could remember things, but I don't know how I really did them, because they just happened so naturally and organically. It wasn't planned. And when you start to develop horses or rehabilitate horses, start them or restart them, you have to have a plan. You do, you guys. You got to have a guide. You can't just take and pick and pull from all these different people. And that was one of the things that I learned. I took the time in that 2 years before I actually made the break to get back into horses. I took the time to understand what I'm talking about right now, because I didn't know it then. I just took the time, and then I started hearing about this, that, and the other trainers, and I would look into them, and I liked their approach, but it just didn't resonate with me entirely, or more than anything, I liked their approach, but it was all a la carte or pieces of their approach. You really couldn't learn a full system of training unless you went out and studied with them. And I was married at the time and had a full life, and there was no way I wasn't ready to divorce my first husband at the time. So that's where I ended up falling into natural horsemanship, because it was the most like my personal beliefs and values as far as not compromising the horse. I loved the classical way. I loved the minutia of it. Everyone wants to be in harmony with their horse, right? But I didn't like the traditional approach. So many people spoke the words, but they didn't walk the walk. And so that's why I went to the books. And even though I continued to take lessons from private instructors that were, silver, bronze, and gold medalists, I was continuously disappointed. And I'll talk about why. And again, this is to just educate you guys and to really drive it home. You don't have to want to train horses for a living or be a professional instructor or clinician. But when you want to develop your horse and you love what you see with me and my horses, you've got to, this isn't just something that you pick and pull from. It just doesn't happen that way. There'll be too many holes in your foundation, not to mention the amount of time that it takes to develop yourself is really crucial here. And that's what, and Sabrina knows that, that's what we were really talking about yesterday. This is really, when you start my mastery membership program, it starts with you. It starts educating you. It starts opening Pandora's box, mostly developing you so that you're more aware, more attuned. It dives in so deep. And the biggest problem with training is we still aren't being taught to respect the horse as an individual, even though we say that, even though we don't want a cookie cutter. And of course, here I have a program. Well, Caroline, but you have a program. Your program is for all horses. Doesn't matter what breed, what level, what discipline, what age, what experience, what trauma, is for all horses. Yes, I do. That is the magic of my program. You're right, I do. I've spent my whole life, the last 10 years, developing this. You're damn straight, I know what I'm doing. But the secret to making this curriculum school of mine work is that each horse is treated as an individual. Each horse, each student is unique. You've got to learn that approach. That's what I teach you, how to learn your horse. But I want your horse to be like my horses. I want well-rounded. I want them emotionally agile. I want them safe. I want you to belong. I want them to belong to you. I want all of this magic to become real. And I know exactly how to make it happen. So without talking more about what I offer, let's talk about what's missing. And of course, Sabrina's here to take questions. So please ask away. Anything about training. You know, today's topic is specifically about what's missing in classical training and training in general. And I think the number one thing with classical training, and we're going to talk a little bit about what classical training is, but one of the things with classical training is they focus so much on the riding mechanics that they don't focus on the whole horse. Now, not all, because when I was reading about Nuno, I never met him, I never studied with him personally, but when I was, you know, even when I read in the podcast the other week from one of his lifetime apprentices who had been with him for so many years, I was really excited about reading her article as she spoke about him and how she knew him and what a great master trainer he was. But some of the areas I didn't agree with either. You know, I'm at the level, and when I came back into horses, I was absorbing as much as I could, but I also followed one program. I chose one program to follow, even though I was taking in other information, but I only practiced and really followed one. And that's important. Learning. Most of us don't even know how to learn correctly. I certainly never was taught, and I struggled. And that's a whole nother story. And so in the development of my online courses, specifically my mastery membership, I talk a lot about learning and how we can best maximize or relearn or learn how to learn. It's really important. So even though I was learning from a multiple different disciplines and theories from different disciplines, I only followed one. I wasn't practicing from all these different people. And how did I know better? How did I know to do it that way, which is really the right way? I took 2 years to plan this. I took 2 years to study. So when I was ready to come back into horses in 2002, I started reading and I started investigating. And there wasn't a lot on the internet. Most of this was through your magazines, and which I subscribed to, and books. And then I also my family and I, we would go every year to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania and the Timonium, Maryland Horse World Expos, where I ended up becoming a clinician and presenting eventually. But we went for 10 to 15 years. So I got to see all these name brands out there. And anyway, you buy their DVDs, you read their books, so you get to know who they are and what their principles are, what their values are, what their concepts and theories are. Very, very important. So by the time I was ready to pick one of them to follow, I'm glad I did. I have to, which I've said many times, I learned more of what not to do when I did eventually pick the one discipline to follow. But it was natural horsemanship. And to me, coming back into horses in the early 2000s, that was the magic thing, the magic sauce, right? I knew all the general horsemanship. I knew of Mark Rashid. I knew of Martin Black. I mean, we got Western Horseman and Horse Illustrated. I think there was a third magazine that Dad and I got, and we'd swap out every month. But I wanted Pirelli. It was Pirelli, and Pirelli had a system. They were the only one with a system. You could buy the DVDs, you had your pocket guides, you had specific steps to follow, and everything just, to me at the time, made sense. as a student and as someone that was going to become a teacher, not in Pirelli, in my own method. And so I followed them, and unfortunately, I don't regret it at all. But I am honest when I say that when I spent 3 months with them, I learned more of what I didn't want to do and how I did not want to teach and what was missing. And I think that's because it was more corporate. Our group was a guinea pig group, and we were told that after I raised my hand and actually had tears in my eyes, and I was all blotchy because I was so upset. And Linda and Pat Pirelli would come and speak to our class every so many weeks, and I was pissed, and I was ready to quit halfway through because I was not happy with the direction we were headed in. I wasn't the only one, so I spoke out. And that's when we all found out, well, we've been observing your class for the last 6 weeks, and your class is a guinea pig. And they were always filming down here in Ocala while we were schooling, so it was easy for them to keep an eye on us. And they had people planted, and I knew that. The president's fiance, who's now his wife, we became very close friends. And I knew that whatever I was saying was going to get back to headquarters because her fiance was the president of Pirelli. He owned 51%. So it was really awesome and interesting. I made some amazing friends, and we were guinea pigs because they were realizing that certain things just weren't working, and good for them, but bad for us. And so I stayed with it. One of the things that happened to me when I came back from learning and I went back home with my horses is I basically had to abandon everything that I had learned. And the reason why I say it like that is because this is often the biggest issue, the number one issue for all of us as students. And I see it a lot in natural horsemanship. I see it in every discipline, but natural horsemanship was supposed to be natural. There's nothing natural about it. And you want to know why? It's too mechanical. It's just way too mechanical. And so, the mechanics of what I had learned was opposing and contradicting the authenticity and the intuitive nature of how I was working with my horses. And what had happened within 6 months is the 3 horses, my Trinity, Smoky, Sundance, and Legend, were no longer coming to me. They were running from me. And I had the best Liberty and the best bridleless. With Legend, we were top of our class, and I'd lost all of that because of just the mechanics. And yet the irony of all of this is when I was at their school, one of the things that they spoke about all the time was linear and nonlinear thinking. And this is one of the main things I took home with me as a student becoming a teacher. Is it's one thing to talk it, and it's another thing to walk it. And so they would say all the mainstream buzzwords, and they would tell you, humans are hardwired to be linear as predators, horses are nonlinear, and yet they weren't giving us the skills or teaching us how to become nonlinear. They really weren't. And so I had become being a type A personality, having a business of my own before, very focused, very driven, very ambitious. Woo, man, it's like lighting putting a match to gas for me. And it wasn't long before my horses were like a big F you. This ain't working. And so that's when I totally stepped back for about a year. And I think this is in 2006 to 2007. And that's when I started developing this work. Yeah. My first 3 DVDs were created in 2008, and my apprenticeship manual. And I was continuing to study other people. But at least I had a foundation. And what I learned, the number one thing I took away from Pirelli is that what's the word I want to say? How beneficial it is to follow a program. How beneficial it is, because you can retrace your steps. It helps you become a better diagnostician, problem solver. It's just, there's something to be said about that. There really is. And then here I started diving into reading about classical training. So when I came back from the natural horsemanship world, I chose natural horsemanship, and I was very turned off from traditional training at a very early age. So when I came back and shit hit the fan with my horses and I took a step back, that's when I immersed myself into classical training. And I was also taking lessons from 3 different high-level dressage trainers and instructors. And I started dabbling with Jack Brainerd in 2006. And I started reading. And what I loved about classical training is the training scale and how important it is to follow the training scale. Again, we get back to a curriculum. And if you listen to the great masters, how much they talk about how much they respect the horse and they don't compromise the horse. The number one thing they do is they learn the horse, and they learn the horse as individuals so that they learn how to work best with that horse. And to me, the word holism comes in, because I have a holistic approach, and holistic means inclusive, and it means you include everything. And so they didn't use the word holism, so to speak, but they said it. We consider the whole horse. We consider the mind of the horse, the emotions of the horse, the spirit of the horse, and the physicality, the agility of the horse, what it naturally is capable to do, not what we want to force it to do. So that also brought me in my learning to the Spanish School of Riding. And I often bring up the Spanish School of Riding because today, still to this day, it is the #1 training system that is around that clearly honors the horse, because it takes 8 years to train these horses, and they don't start them until at least the age of 4, and they start them on the ground, and they learn everything they need to learn, all the whole biomechanics and self-carriage and collection and upper level movements. They learn it in years, and they learn it without a rider. And when the horse is balanced mentally, emotionally, and physically, maybe 4 years into the 8 years, they're ready to find the rider. Now they choose a rider to learn to ride the movement. And the rider learns to ride the movement through lunging. They are not allowed to have reins, no hands. It's all seat and leg aids. Once the two become one, the horse and rider, then the bit is introduced. And the bit's only purpose at this level is to rebalance the horse. The horse is already in control of itself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And the rider knows how to ride the movement. The two are in harmony and in balance. And I've spoken before in our podcasts about the history of the bit and how there were 2 originally designed, and each one was to break one of 2, or each of the points of resistance in the horse's top line. One which is at the poll, which connects to the jaw, and the other is in the shoulder wither area. So here we are with classical training. What's missing? Just look at what I just said. What's missing? I could cry. There's so much missing. And it doesn't matter if you're natural horsemanship. It doesn't matter if you're English equitation, if you're barrel racing, if you're hunter, if you're jumper, if you're reining, and if you're dressage. It covers all disciplines. And especially Western pleasure. It's one of the disciplines I abhor. I cannot stand. I'm going to leave out Western dressage. Yep, I think Western dressage is, and I've written articles on this, and on Western pleasure. Western dressage is one of the up and coming newer disciplines that's a hybrid. And I'm not saying that they include natural horsemanship, but they, based upon their principles and their vision and their mission statement, they are very inclusive. And they are all about developing the relationship and the subtle aids and not like I am. They don't get into the depth that I do, but at least their principles and their mission and their vision supports what I'm talking about to some degree, and but they don't dive into the depth like I do, like developing the horse on the ground, not just in hand, but through, either free lunging or online lunging, where the horse is free to learn how to move and access its own body. We're not forcing it to do anything, but we are developing, like Pilates for horses. We're developing the horse, and we're developing the emotions and the physicality, the athleticism in the horse, so that we can ride that movement to the best of our ability. And that's what's missing in classical training. So the training scale basically in classical dressage it starts out with rhythm, and if any of you have ever looked at it, you can just Google the training pyramid in classical dressage, and it is literally a pyramid, with the first layer being the number one thing you start to develop, which is rhythm. The second step or layer is relaxation. The third is contact. The fourth is impulsion, and the fifth is collection. Now, or straightness and collection. So actually we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. It depends on which school you follow. There's the German, there's the French, there's the Spanish, and I can't remember which one this follows. Rhythm, relaxation, contact, impulsion, straightness, and collection. And I'm going to rearrange it. Now, rhythm can create relaxation, absolutely. But often, this is what I find with my students. If you're a trainer, you've developed your feel and timing. Hopefully, you've worked with enough horses and have found your secret sauce, and what works and your feel. Again, your feel and timing. And so, how long to wait for a horse, or to back off, or to push a little bit to help a horse that can't get relaxed at the trot, let's say at the free lunge, because they're just racing around the round pen. You know what you need to do to help them find relaxation. And often it is through rhythm of the trot, if it doesn't become too dangerous or escalate for the horse. But for students who just want to develop one horse, their very personal horse, and you don't have any experience, starting out with rhythm is insane. And so often with classical training, you're riding with a bit, and you're not being taught to teach rhythm and relaxation without a rider. And so what I often see is you're taught to ride, and there's many backyard trainers that follow this system in order, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. So there's no groundwork. There's no helping the horse find relaxation and rhythm without a rider, which will eventually lead to straightness training and balance and collection. And so when contact is number 3, and in this order, you guys are all fussing around with your horses, and your horses are all distracted or nervous or too lazy, and you're just flooded. You're flooded and they're flooded, and you're overwhelmed and overfaced with so many things to work on at one time that other things get compromised. And the purity of that particular piece, like rhythm or relaxation, is lost. The purity of it, like the purity of the gait, is lost. So you got to work on one thing. You get this. This is what's really missing in classical training. You got to work on one thing. You can't be working on a million, especially if you don't have experience to help you sort out all the things that are going to happen as you're trying to work with all these pieces. And so I often think in training in general, you don't have really educated instructors or trainers, and they're taking this information that they get from a book or they get from the internet, and they're just throwing these words at you when they really don't understand the words themselves, and they don't understand all that goes into creating rhythm and all that goes into creating relaxation. And when you leave rhythm and you finally get it with your horse, you don't leave rhythm. You take rhythm with you into relaxation, and you take rhythm relaxation into contact. Then you take rhythm relaxation contact into impulsion, and you take all of these steps into the next step. You don't abandon the one before. I'm overwhelmed already.
It's a lot.
I mean, and I get students that come to me that are in a solid second or third level dressage, and they're stuck and they're frustrated. And either they come and ride one of my schoolmasters, which is a completely different field because they were never trained with bits, and they have self-carriage. They don't even, and they're so used to squeezing and pumping and kicking and riding with tension in their bodies, they don't even know how to ride a balanced horse, let alone ride without a saddle and a bareback pad. Do we have any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm not here to overwhelm you guys. I'm just here to bring more awareness and education to what continually keeps lacking. And that's in classical training, in any training program. There's very few training programs out there. I think I am, if anyone finds any training programs from start to finish, like they won't be like mine, but any other professional out there online, selling an online riding school from start to finish, send it to me, because I think I'm the only one out there that has a very comprehensive, well-tested, and absolutely proven, inclusive, holistic way of training and retraining your horses. And it comes down to education. And that's why we call ourselves a revolution, right, Sabrina?
Absolutely.
Because it's like, I think, these last few months, especially that we've gone live on Facebook, we've been doing the podcast now since March, and we're over 6,000. We should be close to 7,000. That's pretty amazing downloads. But we just started going live a few months ago. And we'll definitely continue until the end of this year, because it's just about spreading awareness and educating people to taking the time. And one of the things I can't emphasize enough that's missing in so much of the training is enjoying the process. We get so linear. And we're taught to be linear. Like I mentioned with myself coming back into horses, we're taught to be linear, which makes us become very mechanical. And if we're not careful, we're going to be pushing and rushing our horses way too fast, way too fast. And we don't even know that we're doing that because no one's teaching us the opposite or showing us what the opposite is, helping us to slow down, training our eye, training our feel, giving us a compare and contrast. None of that's being offered. We're not creating a happy riding partner. And speaking of riding, I love to ride. There's nothing ever more fulfilling. I don't even know what the right words are. Gratifying, enlightening than to feel as one with my horse when I'm riding. And I mean, more than liberty work, more than anything. Maybe not more than being hugged and loved, but definitely my kittens are playing, definitely the riding, because it's real, and it's such a special feeling to not only be riding the movement, which is so collected and in balance, and you've become harmonious with that movement, but it's the mind and the relationship that's most important. And so while I love to ride, it doesn't mean I ride the piss out of my horses. I, knock on wood, have never had a lame horse, except for Smokey, who we had to put down from crippling, acute, aggressive arthritis in his front knee. But I've never had a lame horse in all the horses I've worked with, the thousands of horses I've worked with, because I've gone slow and I've developed them. They follow the same school I teach, but I've developed them according to what their needs were. So as their teacher and their guide, my responsibility as a teacher, and for all teachers, is you may have a classroom of students that need to learn the same things, but it's how you treat each one and how you help each one learn that makes the difference or breaks it, makes it or breaks it. And that's why so many people shy away in the equine industry from programs. Number one, most of them out there don't know enough to provide a program for you. So they're gonna want to make me look bad. And I've had some competitors, I know who you are. You've said, oh, you don't want a program. There's no one program that's gonna fit everyone. Really? Well, there is a universal school Okay. Basically, we all go to school in each county, each state to learn the same damn things. We all want to be well-rounded individuals, right? It's how we learn and how we're being taught that's going to make or break us. And that's up to the teacher to, again, to look at each individual and make sure that each individual is not left behind and that they are helping each individual learn to the best of their capacity, their ability. It's really important. So I can definitely say there is not enough basic general education, and not with classical training, because when I became a working equitation instructor, when I got passed and became certified in early 2013, in 2012, when I was studying and learning, we spent months training our eye. We spent months watching each other in lessons, looking as a group with our instructor, looking at other videos in all disciplines, and training our eye specifically on rider and equine biomechanics. What looks right, why it doesn't look right in both the rider and the horse, and at all different levels. And that was really important, not to mention we had to study the terminology, and then take the terms that we were learning in classical dressage, take those terms and apply them. How is this going to show up in your execution? Because we're going to be teachers. How's it going to show up in your work with your horse today or your student? How are you going to teach this? Give me an example, Caroline. Well, that kind of learning I love. When I can apply it to something tangible that I'm going to be doing, then I learn it instantaneously, much better than reading and trying to memorize. I can't memorize anything. That's where I was a very poor student. I was bored to death, or maybe there's something wrong with my learning, which there could have been, you know. But I think that's a great way to teach, when the student can take that term and learn how to apply it to themselves, because it becomes very personal. It's really a great way to teach. And again, my Mastery Membership program that's part of how the program was designed, my own personal experiences. And I think one of the many benefits, but one of the big benefits of this program is because I had such a hard time learning, and I talk about this in the program, that I've done a really good job learning how to teach you all how to be better learners. Big time. I think that's number one, probably, because it is huge. I mean, really nobody takes the time to even bring to your attention the way you're learning. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at all of our equine training out there, Sabrina. It's so mechanical. Absolutely. It's so mechanical, and they all hide behind natural, or even when it's gentle, more, you know, the connection piece and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it going, there ain't no connection there. It ain't this kind of connection. I don't see that horse wrapped around you and looking at you and being with you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that one lady that we've seen, it was connection. The head was all high. He was looking everywhere else, and she was like, he's connected to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I teach liberty training. I don't want that kind of training. But if you're not educated, right, you don't know that's not all that there is. You think that, oh, wow, the horse is in an open area and it's staying with me at liberty and hasn't run away. Right. And I'm looking at the 10 things that aren't good. And you know them too. It's like, no, this doesn't look right. And I guarantee you, if that horse is not totally looking at you, that they're going to leave you. Absolutely. Because they're going to follow wherever they're looking. And if they're looking out there, that's where they're going to end up, or at least where they're thinking they're going to be. So much of it is, you know, definite education. I think, and another thing is, and I've said this before in some of our other podcasts, when you're searching for your trainer, whether they're in person or online or both, or whatever means of learning that you are looking for in that equine trainer or instructor, again, take the time to look around, educate yourself. You only know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, meaning you only know what your experience has provided. So if you don't have a lot of experience, and I don't mean hands-on experience all the time. I just mean experience studying, observing, maybe auditing, and looking around and questioning, asking questions, maybe just to yourself, like, well, this doesn't look right. What doesn't look right? How come this horse's head is high, like we're talking about, and it's looking outside the Liberty circle and not at its person? If you just pay attention to those things and listen to your intuition, it'll resonate, or it won't resonate with you.
A lot of people, it seems like they don't care.
A lot of people don't care. But everything's based upon. So Sabrina said a lot of people just don't care. I get that question with a lot of my students too, because the work that they're involved in with me is very deep and very layered. And why aren't more people interested? And I think it just comes down to your level of consciousness and where sometimes it's comfortability, but sometimes your level of consciousness, what you are able to be aware of, is just limited because of so many of these factors, the way you were raised.
Right.
That level of consciousness was never brought up. So you don't know to go outside of that.
She literally jumped up, and when she fell down, that boom went. And so it was like she jumped, boom.
The kittens scared the horses, and you can hear it echoing.
Oh yeah.
There's always something going on. The kittens are really happy. But anyway, so it's like when I say level of consciousness, I'm not trying to put anyone down. Right. It's your frame of reference. Which is your frame of experience. I go back to my first husband and I, we were polar opposites, and we grew up completely differently. And we both sought that difference because his upbringing was very boring and sweet, but very, very, very boring. And mine was very crazy and dynamic. And so I was looking for that really calm, centered person. And he was looking for that dynamic person. In the end, they say opposites attract. Well, it didn't work for us at all. And often, we are attracted to what we are familiar with.
Absolutely.
My second husband is exactly what I'm familiar with, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. Not afraid of it anymore. I was afraid of the level of emotion in many different ways, you guys, because Kurt and I can really butt heads and have some powerful fights and arguments. And when we had that in my family growing up, it was scary and it was traumatic. So I steered away from that. But it also was our way of communicating and connecting. It wasn't all bad. In our family, and it sure is with Kurt and me. So you see where I'm going with this.
Yes, I do.
But where I'm also headed is look at my first husband and I in the polar opposites. Granted, we ended up gravitating to each other, to different ways of being that we were not used to.
Right.
And most people never do, though. Most people stay with what they're familiar with, and they don't know how to get pushed. I come from a family that is high in education, teacher backgrounds, entrepreneurial, it didn't mean we went and got master's programs, but we were always wanting to learn. And that's generational on both sides of my family. And so when you're brought up in that, you're constantly challenging yourself. Not everybody grows up like that. They're content right where they are. No, I know. No. You had a very unusual upbringing, but I'm just saying, if most normal, what is normal, usual, typical upbringings, you have a nuclear family. You did not have a nuclear family at all. And you have a mom and a dad, or at least if you're raised by, the mom, let's just say nuclear, let's keep it simple. So I just think the level of consciousness just really is your level of awareness and what you're also familiar with. And so this is big. That's why we're out there pushing. And a lot of this is hard and exhausting.
Yes, it is.
And, but I have a lot of hope and faith, because the more we do it, the more people we get responding and thanking us, because we're making a better place for the horses and a better place for people.
Absolutely. I think so.
Well, that's what they tell us. Yeah. I mean, that's what they tell us. So we get fan mail in all the time, and we do this for you guys. But yeah, I think that's something important for all of us to think about too, is we get comfortable, and in marketing, and I'm a marketing specialist. That was my other business. So I know what kind of manipulation is out there. And we talk about it a lot because that's where you're going to get, people are going to use a lot of buzzwords and they're going to say what's mainstream because they know that's what you want to hear, and they're going to seduce you and lure you in. And they're good at it. I mean, that's what's hard for me. That's why I have a hard time, because I don't play that game. And when I had my marketing business in DC, I refused to be an advertising company because advertising is so much manipulation and negative manipulation. So we were marketing and communications and design. So you just have to be careful. You have to really be careful. I definitely would start with classical training. And I cannot recommend enough Nuno Oliveira. There are a few others out there. He's one of them. He is the one that resonated the most with me when I went back into reading. And the Spanish School of Riding. I also, again, can't recommend enough Bill and Tom Dorrance. They're no longer here either, but they have a few books out there about feel, and their perspective about horses is just amazing. I mean, they are the godfathers of natural horsemanship. So whenever you look at natural horsemanship, like Pirelli or even Mark Rashid or Buck Brannaman, Ray Hunt, and Jack Brainerd, they all, they've met Bill and Tom when they were alive. And of course, Jackson is 90, so he knew them. And, they were amazing. So they're the godfathers of natural horsemanship. And I think it's just important to just read and I think for anything, just their philosophy on horsemanship is just profound. And the way that they cared about the horse and wanted to learn the horse and understand the horse. I was going to talk about riding real quick before we close up for our podcast. Be careful with riding. Horses typically, there's nothing wrong with getting the first few rides on a young horse, but horses should not be ridden at the age of 2. They should not be in any kind of daily, weekly riding training at all, or any kind of intensive training. They are 2 years old, for God's sakes. Okay? Horses in general, doesn't matter what breed. Arabs take the longest, and then the next Iberian would be the Andalusian. Those 2 breeds particularly, okay, this is research. They take the longest to mature, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The rest of the breeds you can clump together. It takes 7 years for the spine and the rest of the bones to stop growing. 7 years for horses. Think what you're doing to their bodies by driving them into the ground, whether you're lunging them, running them around, riding them. Think what you're doing to them. One of the things with classical training that doesn't exist in competitive training, which is the United States, is we forget that. We forget how to take the time to develop these beautiful creatures, develop them emotionally, mentally, and physically. And it's frowned upon with the true followers of classical training to have a horse under the age of 10 performing constantly. It's frowned upon. They really mature all the way around the age of 15, and then, oh, well, you're done. Let them retire. That's why you want to be developing many horses at once. Let them retire. So just think about all these things and think what we do. And there's so much to enjoy. I haven't been in training with my horses. I say this all the time, and over 1.5 years, and oh my gosh, there's so much to enjoy if you know how to develop it. If you develop the relationship, develop the connection, develop your horse being able to read your thoughts and be with you and be in the group and do a little bit of light training and train your know when it's time to quit and enough's enough and don't push and when to hold and when to wait. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I love learning. I'm never going to stop learning. And so I do believe that being involved with horses is a lot of learning.
And being involved with Caroline, you learn a lot.
Sabrina says, and being involved with me, you learn a lot. You better be up for it. Oh, I need to take a break. I think I'm just going to step away from the program for a couple of months. That's fine too. It's not going anywhere. It's lifetime.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, that is the beauty of it. All right, so that's all I have to say about classical, what's missing in classical training right now. I'd love to hear from you all. Go ahead and leave comments. And you can always email me at Caroline@Tao of Horsemanship, TAO of horsemanship.com. And if anybody knows of anybody else's program out there that's, you know, not DVD, everything's becoming converted online. I'd be interested. I haven't found any yet. Yes, we've got a question.
Joanne, she said, a friend and local 4-H leader who trains and rides old school, or what I call old school, meaning using bits and jerking on the horse's mouth when the horse won't stand still, has a horse that developed trust issues from a trailer loading incident, according to her, and will no longer come to her or anyone when she used to. She uses grain to catch her. Would I be able?
She's one of our students, isn't she?
Would I be able to apply your MM program to her horse to learn to trust again?
Of course.
I really want to help her, and especially the horse and horses she has. Some that are broke to ride,
yeah,
and others that aren't at all.
Great question, Joanne. And Joanne's one of our mastery membership students. Joanne, the program's for every horse. Doesn't matter what their experience. So yes, the only problem you're going to have is, listen, this is big. It's not your horse, meaning you're not the only person working with that traumatized horse that will no longer come or trust people. So you may work with this horse. Let's say you work with this horse 5 days a week to earn its trust. Who else is touching this horse or working with this horse, going against or opposing what you're doing? So therefore, the horse is going to end up having conflicting messages and confusion. And if it's too confused, what's going to happen? It's going to go into the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system does what? Puts the horse in total instinct and survival mode. And that is going to ruin everything you've done. So I say yes, the program is for every horse, all horses, but it's only going to work if you have total influence over that horse. So if there's any, you could probably squirt it from there.
Oh, yeah.
See, they know. If there's any way that you can say, give me 30 days with this horse, hands off, and I'll be the one. And that, you know what that means, Joanne? You're going to have to be the one that handles this horse too. See, I used to have a training behavior center. I'm done. I only work with my own horses now. And unless you hire me for private immersions, I do that work, but you have to be a member of the mastery membership. The point I'm making is, being a behavioral training center, I was the only one handling these horses, okay, day in and day out, or my staff who were usually working students. So of course they knew how. So the horse got the same consistency and repetition that it needed. My concern is you go there so many days a week, who's handling this horse? Again, conflicting messages. And the end result is going to be the horse is always, because it already is in its sympathetic nervous system, it's going to go right back to that. Now, not to complicate things, people often ask me, well, Caroline, I'm leasing a horse or I share a horse, and can I use this method? Yes, you can, if that horse isn't really screwed up, right, or traumatized. But this horse is severely traumatized. And that's why it has to be a total one-on-one with you. Do you have the ability, Joanne, to be the only one to handle and feed this horse? Because so much of that type of handling, using the mastery membership approach, just that type of work can change everything, because you're changing the mindset in the nervous system. It's not so much about, I got to get it in a round pen, or I got to put it online, I got to make it happen. So much can happen by doing so little, but you have to be the only one working with this horse, and you can't train it right now because it's not open to learning. You've got to be the one handling it and making that difference, that association completely different. So I hope that helps. That's why the mastery membership, it's different when you're using it with just your own horse, because it's going to work, because it's just you. But the minute you start trying someone else's horse, you've got to consider all these things that as a professional rehab specialist and trainer, I know that all those other areas, like handling it on a day-to-day basis, feeding it, grooming it, bathing it, it's got to be only you. Because this horse doesn't trust. Every little thing someone else does is going to set it off, just like that, just like it would us. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So God love you.
So much.
God love you for doing that. But we can talk more about that. That's a great question. Great question. Thank you, you guys. So next week, ooh, I'm excited about this one. I'm always excited. But next week, oh, another question, but let me tell you what's going to come next week. 20th and 21st, we're going to have part 1 and part 2 of Is Your Horse a Reflection of You? The science and psychology of reflection, or horses mirroring us. This is some deep, deep stuff. I've been talking about this forever. So but talking about it, we're finally starting to do videos and podcasts about it. So that's next week.
It'll be fun.
Yep. Is Your Horse a Reflection of You? Part 1 and 2, the science and psychology of mirroring. All right. We've got one more question.
Erin, it's actually a really good question. She asked, so is it not worth it to do this work if other people are going to be handling my horse?
And who is this?
Erin.
Our Erin?
Our Erin.
Erin, yeah. Hello, girl. Yeah. I can't say that it's not worth it. And so let's look at it like this. So Erin's question is, I'm in the Mastery Membership program, Caroline, and is the program worth it if I'm not the only one handling my horse? It all depends on what is the strongest influence. And they're certainly going to hurt. Absolutely. If your horse has a lot of trauma. If your horse is average, not difficult, not challenging, and you've joined the program because you want to develop all of these wonderful areas, yeah, you're going to it'll be okay. But when you have horses with trauma or behavioral issues, like around food, and they're aggressive to other people, who's going to handle that? And if the people feeding your horse aren't handling it the same way, what's predominantly going to end up happening? The horse is going to predominantly keep doing what they've been doing because nobody's correcting it, nobody's interrupting it, nobody's changing it. But if that's all you're talking about, Erin, because I'm pretty sure it's just around feeding or handling. That's just feeding and handling. There's a million other areas you need to develop that only you are going to develop with Kyla, right? Mm-hmm. Kyla. Yeah. So you're fine, but don't expect all the work you're doing in the Mastery Membership to totally change her food issues or her pissy issues around food, because you should be the one handling that in order to make the greatest change, because it's such a challenge. So that one area is still going to end up the same. It's not going to change. Great question, though. Mm-hmm. I think the best thing I can say to all of you with those two questions are very similar, is developing horses is like developing children. It's like developing your puppy. I'm training these kittens. I'm training them to come. And they don't come because of treats. I'm training them to come. Everything's a positive emotional reward. All my training is. So they're coming, they're learning what that means. Don't jump on things. The backup is the squirt bottle. Only has to happen once or twice. And Sabrina just looked at them wrong and they jumped off the counter. So I'm systematic. Okay, I am consistent, I am repetitious, and I reward the hell out of it with lots of love. And that makes every freaking animal I've ever worked with, and cats are not easy. My cats are like dogs, aren't they? Mm-hmm. These kittens. So think of your horse training, your horse developing. Your development of your horse is no different than raising children. Well, I've never raised a kid. Have you raised a puppy? Have you raised a kitten? Have you raised a goat? Have you raised a socially intelligent species? That's the horse. It's no different. And if you haven't, the program will help you. But you've got to think systematically like that. Systematically like that. So that's really, and the same thing with Kyla, you know, her food issues or those particular challenges aren't going to change. They need to be included in everything you're doing, you know. Just don't think miraculously, well, I'm doing all this work in the program, but then you're not handling her in certain areas of her life that she needs that type of consistency and reinforcement. Okay. We good?
We are good.
All right, awesome. Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you guys next week for Is Your Horse a Reflection of You? And part 1 and part 2, the science and psychology. And then the last week of October, we're going to do coddling versus being attentive. Sabrina can't wait for this. Which are you with your horse? Do you coddle, or is it because you're just really attentive? And then the second one, I love this one, is anthropomorphizing. Are we anthropomorphizing, or are we understanding horses? Is there a difference?
That's such a complicated word.
I know, I never say it right. Okay, thank you all. Love you. God bless you. And may you always be one with your horse. Bye-bye.